Hello, ladies and germs, and welcome to the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. Oh, hello, gentlemen, as well. I introduced the germs because obviously the germs from the coronaviruses and that, they'll be coming back now. People aren't cleaning their hands as often, Chris. They're coming back. All the germs, they've gone away for a very long time because of all this hand washing and social distancing and stuff. And now they're on the rise. You see, a lot of people getting sick and ill and such. So, it's very interesting. We could potentially even link that in one way, shape, or form to today's theme, because today's episode is called Kinky About Poverty, which is something that one of our Patreons, I do believe, I don't think they suggested it as a podcast title, but I thought it was a bloody brilliant.
It's a phrase they used, I think.
It is a phrase. Kinky about poverty. Now, money magic and all of that is quite a big theme in Witch War 6, our competition that we're holding at the moment, in May 2022. Did I get that right?
You got that right this time, yeah.
Okay, good. I get my years and centuries mixed up, Chris. You know this. I need to be checked.
You do. But I don't think there's a doctor brave enough to check you.
Right, so money magic and the like, kinky about poverty. So there's the general idea of money magic, and that some people obviously would say, oh, no, it's a bad thing. You shouldn't do it, this and that, blah, 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 blah. More people are coming around to the idea that using magic in your own power and stuff in order to get an advantage when it comes to getting the monies and sort out debts and money problems and that could be quite a powerful thing to use. You know, magic, super powerful, possibly a good advantage you might have. Now, those people may be on board with the idea of it, but they're struggling to actually work any money magic. And the idea that we kind of alluded to, maybe talked briefly about in the Witch War 6 competition video, was the idea that people may be holding themselves back. So the concept that, well, actually, they don't feel it can work, or they don't actually feel that they should be, or cannot imagine themselves and see themselves in a position of being wealthy. You know, if you've had to sign on and live on the benefits for a long time and you're living paycheck to paycheck, they cannot imagine actually being out of that because they've been in that rut for so long, which may cause a problem. Now, does that cause a problem? Because this is going back to this idea that you need to believe the spell will work in order to make it work. And I don't know whether that is entirely the case all of the time. What are your thoughts?
I think people's disbelief is often what affects them more than their ability to believe. I think sometimes when people are so hold on to spells for too long and don't realize they're actually holding on to it. So I think the anxiety that comes around spells that matter, like this is why we often talk about how, you know, wishing for something or casting for something that you don't really need, they often work better, and that's because you don't hold on to them, because you don't particularly care about the outcome. And I think a lot of it, when it comes down to money magic, is people turn to money magic when they really need it, not when they don't need it. And then they fall into one of two traps, which is either they don't believe it's going to work and therefore are holding on to it, or they're holding on to it because it can't leave their mind because they're desperate for the money. And those two processes both mean you're holding on to that spell with its choker chain on and aren't letting it go in order for it to manifest.
I think that there's a big difference between a lot of the practitioners that are around today and those kind of old world traditional witchy type ones. And I don't mean modern traditional witchcraft. I mean kind of traditional magical practitioners, very often folk magical practitioners from a few hundred years ago, because the modern magical practice in the Western world is not survivalist. It seems to be a bit more hobby. Seems to be a little bit more, this is my hobby. I'll go and attend a group ritual. I'll go and do this. I'll celebrate the Sabbath. Not something that's vitally important to your life. So not something that actually you need to make sure that that Sabbath ritual works, because otherwise you're completely screwed and you're probably going to die. You won't see it through the winter type thing. This modern magic, from what I've seen a lot of the time, is more of an exploration of the self, a little bit of exploration and a flirt with spirituality, and dressed up with a kind of aesthetic. Now, I don't want to say that everyone's like that, but I do think that it is a very important point that we need to make, because no other fucking person is making that. And that is that witchcraft and magic back in the day, survivalist. It is necessary. You're only really doing the magic that is necessary. You're not necessarily doing a load of stuff just for the fun of it. Everything you're doing is, it needs to work, you know? You're doing your the year, which nowadays we think of celebrations and Sabbaths, but actually rituals and such that may be done by magical practitioners of the past was to ensure their survival. It was to ensure a good harvest. It was to ensure that something would happen and that the negative thing wouldn't happen, instead of the positive outcome that they want. Nowadays, not so much. And the problem with this is that back in the day, everyone that did magic, there was something on the line. You know, it was something big. It was important. It was on the line. And if your magic was to go wrong, then you're going to be negatively impacted by that. With today's comfortable magical practitioner in the Western world, that is not the case. And when you take these people that have been messing about trying to manifest things just for the fun of it, and then you put them in a situation where they actually really, really need to make that spell work, because it is basically a matter of life and death, they cannot do it because they've never learnt their craft on the front line, I suppose you'd say. They're not battle hardened like the magical practitioners of the past that would have learned by doing actual work. Nowadays it seems a little bit more sanitized, but also not a huge amount that's on the line. And that's quite a dangerous place to learn. You see a very big difference between the people that utilize magic to actually improve their lives and need it versus those that necessarily don't. You see some things continuing on with magical practice. I know with travelers and gypsies and stuff like that, there's a lot of magical practice that still revolves around them utilizing and needing it in order to get by in the everyday. The average person that's got a full-time job, you know, 1.2 kids, husband or wife, they're not really, magic is secondary. Magic's kind of like this, oh, I finished work, I've gone out with some people after work on the way in at the pub, I've come back and I need something to do on the weekends, kids are away at the camp, I know I'll go and join a pagan ritual, or I'll get on the Facebook and be a keyboard warrior. This is a difference, this is a problem. And any craft, anything that you have to do for trial and error, you can relate to witchcraft and magic and spellcasting and that, because when you pick up a lot of crafts, you're not going to be 100% perfect first time. I know that when I started trying to do knitting recently, right? It was pretty shit. There were holes in it and I dropped stitches and stuff like that. I'm a little bit better now. I've got some practice, but the modern practitioner, what they're doing is they're waiting for something to happen in their lives whereby, oh crap, I cannot pay the mortgage this month. I suppose I should, given that I've been practicing witchcraft for 30 years and I'm a third degree initiate of some magical witchcrafty tradition, I suppose I should utilize my magic. Oh, what do I do? Well, I suppose I'll just do this kind of spell. Yeah. Oh no, look, it hasn't worked. Right. I'm seeing this more and more and more. A lot of people won't admit it, but more coming to light, more people are admitting that they're I don't know what you call, I like the idea of battle hardened. magical practices, but their practical abilities, let's say, practical magical abilities aren't quite up to par and far below the standard that they need to be at, or that you would expect to be at if someone's been practicing for a decade or two or three. You know, have you noticed a trend over the centuries, Mr. Chris?
Yeah, I suppose more people now, it's a dabble. And actually, I think big magic scares people. And I think I kind of want to throw in the kind of kinky aspect of the kinky about poverty, of kind of going, there is still that fear, I think, of modern practitioners that if they take money now, they're going to have to pay it back later, kind of thing. And I think actually, you know, that kind of where they go, oh, I'm going to take it now, but they're so used to the kind of debt culture of credit cards and mortgages and things like that. I think that part of their programming in their brain says, well, if I take that, I'm clearly either taking it from someone else or I'm taking it from myself further down the line, because they do see it still as a finite resource, which I know is very different to the way that, you know, I have my issues with it are very different. But I think a lot of people think about it in these terms. So they think almost like, well, if I take it now, I haven't earned it and I'm going to have to give it back later. And I think that's where the kinky part comes in, is where they're punishing themselves, because actually that mindset is what's making sure that actually is a potential, that you're going to have to pay it back later because you've put that into your spell when you've manifested it. Which is where I often talk about when we talk about kind of beginner spell crafting, and we kind of tell them of all the, you know, the potholes across the way that people fall down into. I think that also enters their psyche of kind of going, oh, I need to think about this, I need to think about that, I need to think about the other, rather than literally just going, I need it and I want it, so fucking give it me. And they haven't actually separated themselves from those kind of aspects of this is going to happen, it's coming from here, that's how I get it. Whereas, as you quite rightly like to point out to me all the time, that it all is just zeros and ones now. It's not even necessarily backed up into reality by something physical, as it once was.
Yeah, kinky about poverty reminds me of, I am so stuck within this life of being poor that I can't imagine not being poor. And because I can't imagine not being poor, it kind of comes from an unconscious realm. And my unconscious basically says, no, we're poor. So you're fighting with your own unconsciousness to a certain extent. So if you are one of the sort of a magical magician-y types that need to feel like they need to be fully on board with a magic spell to work, and need to feel that they deserve that money in order to make that magical thing happen, then, you know, it's one of those things. However, that's not true. Okay, when it comes to magical practice, I see a lot of people, yes, when they do spell casting, they can get in their own way because they try to do spells for things that they don't actually want. And there's strange manifestations and misfirings that very often happen. You see it time and time again. I'm sure there are lots of magical practitioners that are listening now or in the witch group that could share stories about that very thing happening, where they've got a spell that they've wanted to do. They kind of consciously feel like they want to do it, but there's some unconscious niggle. There's a part of them that's like, no, I don't actually want that. And then that interferes with it. The way of getting round to that is I actually think of it as a thing that you need to get around, because once you've identified that that could potentially be a problem for you, if you yourself are in fact kinky about poverty in an unconscious way, on an unconscious level, and actually feel that you will never really break out of that, and that your spellcasting is doomed before it starts to happen. There are ways around that, but you need to think of it as an obstacle or problem that needs a solution. It needs solving, because there are solutions. Maybe that type of spell is something that you cannot work, because if you're trying to manifest £1,000,000 pangs in a week and you don't believe that it can happen and you're not supplying enough energy to it, then potentially that's going to happen. Maybe you do get that and you just win it on a game or get fake Monopoly money or something like that, But what other methods would there be? Well, one of the classical methods from grimoires and, that kind of approach is that not petition work, because that's basically just begging a spirit or deity to do something for you, but bargaining, coming up with a contract, interviewing potential people, things, teams, spirits that will be able to jig the future, to realign the universe, realign things so that you do get what you want. Okay, so if you are trying to manifest some money and you don't believe that you deserve it, and you're having a misfire with your spell casting, and you've identified that actually you just can't do the spell because you've got no faith in it whatsoever, and you've tried time and time again, then it may be time for a different approach. And there are many approaches that you can take. It's not just spell casting. Are you able to evoke or invoke a spirit and talk to it and explain the fucking situation and say, I want this money, this is money in this place called Earth, the physical realm. Money is quite important. I fucking want some. Please give it to me. But there's some certain criteria that you need to bring it to me. I cannot be arrested for doing anything illegal. I need to keep the money and be able to spend it on whatever I want. And I don't want to have to claim on some sort of crazy ass insurance because I've got involved in a car accident and I got a payout. All of these things are no-nos. This is the stuff that you would negotiate with the spirit and explain your perspective and your point of view. Obviously, not coming from the perspective that you assume the spirit knows exactly what you want. But at the same time, maybe you don't do that sort of thing. Maybe you don't like working with spirits. Is that the only other option? No, I can think of lots of other options. What about plain old bloody psychic ability, gazing into the future? If you know things that are going to happen in the future, you can profit from them. Profit means, being prosperous, but it also means potentially making trades, making investments, seizing opportunities no one sees because they don't know what's going to happen yet. And yet, if you've got psychic ability, you can. So why not use your tarot to see opportunities, either that are currently here at the moment, right in front of you that you're not currently seeing, or ones that are going to be coming by soon that you would have otherwise not noticed. Many different approaches, Chris, to magic, and not just the usual BS spells that you get from spell books, which contains 5,000 or so spells that you can do. One of the things that I do see actually with regards to spell casting is this idea of not necessarily calling things money magic. There's money spells and money magic, but very often, much like this very lovely incense I got from a shop in Glastonbury, it says prosperity on it. They don't want to say money, they want to say prosperity. So, Chris, what does prosperity mean to you? And why do you think it would be always equated with money, or why so many associations with money?
I think prosperity for me means incoming, because I don't know why, but my brain can't separate the word prosper with phosphorus, and I instantly think kind of rich metal that combusts. But that might just be a weird kink in my brain. Prosperity for me means wind rush, or sudden sudden gold rush or whatever. Or it means wealthy. So kind of someone being prosperous, someone that just seems to attract money or attract wealth. And I think prosperity is more closely related to the word wealth
Mm.
than it necessarily is the word money. So, because some people, at the end of the day, the reason the incense is called prosperity and not wealth is because they don't want to have people coming back going, this didn't work. So the word prosperity is far more flowery and therefore has more uses, because you could mean prosperity as new baby, you could mean prosperity as new house spell, you can use prosperity in all of those kind of success kind of magics, as well as just being about money. In is why it's named that. But actually the word prosperity to me means sudden kind of windfall, or gold rush. It has that kind of feeling of something coming, or controversially, as a long-standing wealth if someone is prosperous. But that's me just kind of word playing, bit of tug of war with the word itself. Whereas I would prefer a kind of wealth spell or a money spell.
What would you consider wealth to be then? Because that's an interesting one, because people say rich, I want to be rich, I want to be rich. Whereas wealth is a little something, I don't know, there's something else about that. There's something that makes
Yeah,
it
wealth to me is a stable word.
Yeah.
It means having enough that it is no longer a thought. Someone being wealthy, it has that kind of, because it rhymes with health. There is that kind of healthy aspect. That kind of wealth part is that it's a maintained money, or prosperity, or any of those other words. I think wealth has more to do with the word stability.
There's two people that I think of that I met back in the day when I worked in construction. Both of them were clients. Okay. Well, one of them was a client, one of them was a tenant of a client, I suppose, putting it specifically. The first one was an older lady that I was doing some work for, and she said she wouldn't shut up. She was one of those people that chat. She had quite a few, she was older, she had a few medical conditions and things like that. And she'd always say, I would trade wealth for health, because she sat fairly comfortably in terms of not needing, she's got a decent pension and all that kind of thing. Her husband died and left her some money. Her son, unfortunately, died, left her some money. She was in a state of having money. She would always say, I would trade wealth for health. Okay. Which always made me think, bullshit, you want both. And you probably want a little love as well. But it was the state that she was in, that she was obviously, the pain, I want to make the pain go away. There is another person who, when I was doing HMOs, which is shared houses, basically a lot of students and stuff live in HMOs. I was doing some work for a landlord in one of the HMOs, and one of the students that was there was talking. I overheard them. I didn't have the conversation with them, but they were talking about getting paid to be part of essentially some sort of clinical trial. So trading their potential health for some money. They were testing a drug or something. And I was like, here we have the old person who's accumulated a lot of wealth, and's comfortable, and that doesn't mean a lot to her. And she wants health because she's suffering. Then we've got the young person who's very healthy, but they have no money, not a pot to piss in. And they're willing to trade their health for wealth, for money. And I don't like people that put things in this category and try to make one thing better than the other, because I've heard a lot of people that will also say health is so much more important than wealth. But these people are very often not understanding that you should not be trying to trade one for the other. That ideally you want to be wealthy and healthy and happy and prosperous. For me, prosperity It's the Cambridge Dictionary. I've loaded up. Cambridge Dictionary has a definition which I don't agree with. Their definition is the state of being successful and having a lot of money. Okay, and they give an example of a country's future prosperity depends to an extent upon the quality of education of its people. If that's coming from Cambridge Dictionary, I think they're biased towards education, Chris. They also say the war was followed by a long period of peace and prosperity. Also something that's biased from Cambridge.
Yeah.
But my idea of prosperity is very much combined with money factors into it, but luck also factors in. Prosperous is I'm living in a state of not really needing, where things kind of pan out, you know, and that changes very rapidly. I've met people that continuing along the lines of people that aren't, weren't very well. I've met people that have got several £100,000 in the bank account that would be considered wealthy. They'd probably be considered in the top 10% of the richest people in the world, which you don't need that amount and not that much money to be, unfortunately, in this day and age. But they would think, well, actually, you know, you may have 150 to 200,000 pounds in the bank account, but you are retired and you're soon to be going into a nursing home, which is costing you £5,000 a week. How long is that going to last? You know, is that enough money to get you going for the rest of your life? You know, all of these things, it's basically, I'd say, a state of being. So prosperity and prosperous people, it cannot be quantified in a value. I think it's more about the lifestyle and the amount. So for someone that may not have a huge amount of money, like I hear about people going and retiring abroad, like going to Thailand and living on not very much money, you know, over there, because their money goes a lot further, and living on a beach, that kind of thing, living frugally on a lower income. But they're prosperous, they're happy. And yet I know people that work in the city that are on 6-figure salaries that are not happy, and they're not prosperous, but they have a lot more money. So I think it is, to a certain extent, existing in a state where your needs are met and you're comfortable. Prosperity seems comfortable with a little effort. And I think prosperity is an interesting one, because prosperity is something that you should obviously try to work towards. I think luck is one of those things that we attribute towards some people are just lucky. So that person's got that nice life, they're just lucky. Whereas other people that have actually come from a crappy life and have forged a prosperous, happy, you know, comfortable life for themselves, that's something that I think is more of an aim. I see prosperity as something that you're trying to aim for. Wealth is potentially a part of prosperity, but I'd say prosperity is a bigger umbrella. Wealth, like you, I'd say, is kind of, I think, old money when I think of wealth. I think our money's not a problem. There's enough, an abundance of it. Whereas when you think of windfalls, when you think get rich, be rich, you think I've just won a loads of money, but you know, it's possibly something that I could burn through all of. We've got about a minute left, and then I suppose we should talk a bit more of the intricacies of money magic, maybe help out some of those people that are currently doing the Witch War sit, which is all to do with money magic, basically. Anything else you'd like to say in our last minute?
Well, I just want to say, like, you know, for those listening who don't listen to the podcast, the other side of the watershed, you really should go do that. But 2 is to kind of go, why have we just spent 10 minutes talking about wordplay? And I think the importance of that is this is the stuff that gets in the way when you're producing spellcraft work, is your understanding of those words matters, because it's you and your consciousness that's part of that kind of spell triangle that makes that manifestation happen. And if you can't explain that, then, you know, you're kind of stuck there. And that's why your spell work's probably not working.
Right. Well, that's it for this edition of the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. Join the Thoth Witchcraft Patreon if you want to make us more prosperous.